Hi, my name is Olivia Krueger, and welcome back. I'm here with Dr. Michael Mazius today, and we are going to be going back to the discussion we were having about suicide and when to initiate the conversation, except for this time I think we're going to look at which population may be most vulnerable and what the prevalence is in today's day and age, I guess.
And maybe why.
Yeah, and
or
why.
Sort of speculate on why.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So, as I was reading and doing some research on this topic, I came across a lot of interesting facts about how suicide has risen by at least 25% within the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. Do you see, or can you tell us what might be the reason for that, or why that might be happening?
Sure, I'll do that, and I'll say from the outset, it's going to be speculative, because even though I've tried to look at research, recent research on this very topic, I haven't come across anybody who has, I think, clearly and unequivocally identified, what the reasons might be. And then, if you don't mind, I think since you're actually on a college campus and you're studying psychology, and you're perhaps steeped in current research, I'm going to ask you some questions too, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So let me just sort of throw out some things. These are some things that I recently found that sort of pick up on this point you just made about the 25% spike, which is kind of a staggering number. The prevalence data that I found indicate that suicide is the third leading cause of death in the United States among adolescents and young adults. The third leading cause. It's the second leading cause of death in the U.S. among college students. So it's the second leading cause. Between 2006 and 2016, the suicide rate in white kids increased by 70%. That's what my data tell me. And between 2006 and 2016, there was an increase of 77% among Black children. Inpatient admissions for suicidal ideation and foiled action more than doubled from 2008 to 2015. White males between the ages of 14 and 21 seem to be the group most at risk of committing suicide, and females from 10 to 14 appear to be a growing risk. So those are pretty staggering numbers.
Yeah.
And so, when you think about, what perhaps is contributing to that, I'm going to give sort of like two guesses, one of which I think is sort of old and the other is more recent. The old factor, or the older factor, may be the pressure our kids, our middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college kids are putting on themselves to operate perfectly, in school and or in sports. I think perfectionism, unfortunately, has been on the rise, and that combined with catastrophizing, which is a way in which adolescents may typically think, could account for the growing percentage. Secondly, and I've said this to groups of people to whom I've spoke recently, both pediatricians, nurses, nurse practitioners, and parents of middle schoolers and high schools, and they all seem to agree that the low-hanging fruit right now is technology. That people are spending probably too much time staring at a screen, kind of comparing their lives to others who kind of curate a life for themselves on applications like Snapchat, Instagram. I think Facebook has really sort of become passé. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, don't sue me, but I think Facebook is really becoming sort of more and more passé for high school kids, and college kids. But nonetheless, I think it's technology that is putting pressure on kids, and just sort of alarmingly, I find more and more kids who I see in my office spending way too much time on YouTube, and this probably won't come as a surprise to those of you who are listening in. But there are people who go on YouTube and type in the words, "How do I kill myself?" And you'd be shocked by what comes up. And oh, by the way, among adolescents and college kids, the number one modus operandi for suicide these days happens to be asphyxiation through hanging. And you can go online and find out how to do that. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think that's sort of like what's at root. I'm curious, you're on campus, I no longer am, sadly. And so I'm sort of wondering, what do you think is causing this growing trend towards like suicidal thinking and activating?
Yeah. I really do agree with your comment on perfectionism. I think a lot of students my age are definitely trying to reach the goal of, the best grades they can get, being the best athlete, being the best kid, being the best friend. And I think that puts a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on their lives in general. Looking at social media, like if I go through and look at my different feeds, I see all these pictures of people being happy, and I know that that's not reality. Like anybody would, your life is never going to be picture perfect like you see on what's on Instagram or what's on Facebook like that. So I think a lot of times these kids my age or younger are trying to reach that goal of being, getting the most likes on Facebook or getting the most likes on Instagram. And that's really unrealistic, I think. And they don't set realistic goals for themselves. And then when they don't reach those unrealistic goals they've set, then they're hard on themselves. So I think that has to do with it, because it's kind of like they're letting themselves down, they're not good enough. Stress from school and homework, college is a hard time. It's a fun time in your life, but it's really hard with all of the homework that you have and trying to keep up with your social life, trying to keep in touch with your family, trying to have fun, and then trying to get your grades in so you can graduate and go on and be successful in your career. So I think that adds a lot of extra stress that people can't really handle these days. And I think you can go back and relate it to how, I guess, young adults' lives must have been, 20, 30 years ago. And it's very different with technology added to it, like you said.
Probably just places more demands on, a younger person's time, or even somebody, who is older and out in the working world. People have perhaps greater expectations of what can be done in a certain period of time, because you can get sort of information now just from sort of clicking away at a few keys.
Yeah, and that's something that I've caught myself getting angry at when I don't receive a message right back when I have a question, or if I don't get that instant gratification, I find myself getting upset about it, but then I have to sit and remember, it's okay, I'll get the answer, I'll get the message back when I need it, or when it's going to happen naturally. So I think a lot of times people don't really take into consideration that instant gratification and instant messages is not always going to happen. It's not always going to be like that, or it shouldn't be like that, I think. And technology has told us different from the start to how it is right now.
That's an excellent point. Let me ask you sort of one last question. I was thinking about this as we're talking. To me, sort of like the perhaps the paradox or the irony is, if you're online, you have exposure to multiple people, friends. You can easily engage in a group Snapchat text or a texting sort of string. Do you think that these days people who struggle with anxiety and or depression are perhaps more likely or less likely to kind of level with their friends about it and thus seek, the social support that can really like steady someone? Or do you think people are becoming more secretive about their kind of like inner lives?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think I've definitely seen with some of my friends or with my college campus in general, a lot of people are starting to bring more awareness to those kind of feelings and thoughts, which I think is very important. But I also think that people using these devices and different types of social media, it's kind of like a sensory overload for them. So they're trying to take in all of the information they can so they can kind of bury the emotions or the feelings or the state that they're in, because they don't want people to see how they actually are feeling.
Wow, that's so interesting. That's so unfortunate. So maybe like one of the takeaways for those of you who are watching this and listening is suicide ideation is up. Unfortunately, activation on one's suicide ideation is rising. Our kids, our college kids, our high school kids, our middle schoolers are at risk, and what perhaps like we can do to address this, at least hopefully effectively, is by encouraging our kids not to be so solitary or so guarded in terms of what they're going through. And I think what we're going to try to do in a subsequent video is have someone come to this office, and we're going to do a role play where I'm going to be a parent, and we're going to have someone act as if he or she is my son or daughter, and we're going to show you what a conversation can look like in an effort to get at those innermost thoughts. Because once they're sort of out on the table, then you can address them. You can help the person opposite you, your son, your daughter, your friend. You can help them address what they're kind of living with, the scary and weighty feelings that they're living with. We can help them. You can help address them. You can help them address them constructively. So come back and let's continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.